Chapter 13, the Gnostics, the Heretics. Gnosticism, like the ancient mysteries, was founded on Spiritism, their mediums giving instructions purporting to come from the gods or spirits. In the Christian era, one of the earliest prominent Gnostics was Simon Magus, a Jew and an adept of the sect of the Scythians. This article is composed of certain passages transcribed verbatim from the Moravians, compared and detected by Lavington. Among the successive disciples of Simon Magus were Basilides, Valentinius, Carpocrates, Marcus, Marcion, Cerdo, Epiphanes, Montanus, etc., and according to Bishop Lavington, these were heretics, and that they were heretics of the worst kind that ever defiled and disgraced the Christian name, is allowed by all denominations of Christians. Some of these lived in the 1st century and even in the Apostles' days, but the 2nd century was most fruitful in the production of this generation of vipers, and we must receive our knowledge of their abominable tenets from the early ecclesiastical writers, such as Irenaeus, Epiphanius, Theodoret, and many others. The spirit among these heretics went by different names: Ogdos, Sophia, Terra, Jerusalem, and Lord in the masculine gender. Is particularly called both Prunicus and Prunica, Mother Prunica the bold, and Mother Achamoth. Their mother is a woman from a woman. Sometimes their celestial beings are neither male nor female, sometimes interchangeably either male or female. Such was the excellency of their knowledge and illumination, who arrogantly styled themselves Gnostics, that they are superior to Peter or Paul or any of Christ's other disciples. They only have drunk up the supreme knowledge, are above principalities and powers, secure salvation, and for that very reason are free to debauch woman or indulge all manner of licentiousness. This knowledge is of itself perfect redemption and sufficient. Simon Magus, who taught that his harlot Helena was the Holy Ghost, instituted certain foul and infamous mysteries, inexpressibly filthy, and had assemblies equally filthy to celebrate them. These being the mysteries of life and of the most perfect knowledge. The Carpocratians, I always have problems pronouncing this word. The Carpocratians practice all manner of philters and enchantments, in order as they speak to have full power in all things, and to do whatever they please. Hence they spend their time in luxury and pleasure and bodily enjoyments, nor ever come among us, unless it to be ensnare unstable souls and entice them into their impious doctrine. For this end they taught incontinence to be obligatory as a law, and not only lawful but necessary till salvation, not only compatible with the Saviour's religion, but an essential part of it. And whose were the best men? The best men who, in the common opinion, were the most vicious. I'm sorry, I have to comment here. I had to read that over and over again. Incontinence? Okay. So, it says incontinence. So here we go. I'll just go on. The Carpocratians grew to that degree of madness that being unable to conceal their debaucheries, they made incontinence to be a law. Prodicus added this to the tenets of Carpocrates, that fornication ought to be open and public, and the use of women common, for which reason in their feasts the candles were extinguished, each lay with the woman as chance appointed, and they called this lasciviousness a mystical initiation, a mystical communion. Clemens Alex gives a long passage from the writings of Epiphanes, contending for a community of women as being the law of heaven, and that men and women ought no more be confined in their amours than other animals. For, says Epiphanes, he had implanted a strong and vehement desire in man of propagating his species, which neither law nor custom nor a thing else can abolish, for it is the decree of God. The Ophites or Cainites say that Cain was the progeny of a higher principality than Abel, and they confess that Esau, Korah, and the Sodomites and all such were their relations, that Vulva was the creator of the universe, and that none could be saved unless he passed through all. So also Hippocrates taught most of the Gnostics, with wonderful artifice of improbability, taught what is not fit to be named, in the promiscuous use of women, and to roll in a manner of filthy communication. The banquet being over, says the man to the woman, "Arise, and shew thy love to a brother." So they proceed to copulation. Some of them, by a most horrible abuse of Scripture, apply the words, "Give to every one that asketh thee," towards enticing the women. "Take hold," said Isidorus, "of some robust woman, that you be not plucked away from grace, and when you have spent your seminal fire, you may pray with a good conscience." Both Epiphanius and Erroneus before him say of the founder of the Nicolaitans, being ashamed of his own remises, he audaciously pronounced that no one who was not lavicious every day could be partaker of eternal life. Therefore, those Gnostics, after debauchery, were used to boast of their happiness as having done a meritorious thing. And when they had their will on a complying female, they told her she was now a pure virgin, though she was daily corrupted and for many years together. This may be a proper place to introduce the confession of Epiphanius, who in his youth had fallen into the Gnostic hearsay, whence he received what he writes concerning them from the professed teachers' own mouths, when their women, one in particular, used all their arts to debauch him. But by the help of the divine grace, he overcame their temptations. "I was then," says he, "reproached by those pestilent women, who thus scoffingly talk with each other. He would have saved his youth, but not being able, we have suffered him to perish in the hands of the principalities. For the most beautiful among them make herself the bait, and those whom she enticeth, she is said not to destroy, but to deliver, whence the handsomest are used to upbraid those who are less so. I am an elect vessel, able to save those whom I attempt, which you have not power to do. The most beautiful of them were employed to seduce me, but God delivered me from their wickedness. After reading their books, I escaped from among them, and discovered the several names of them to be bishops of those parts, and near 80 of them were sent into banishment. The Valentinians, says Erroneus, being in love with certain women, would without a blush seduce them from their husbands and make them their own wives. Others of them, seemingly modest at first, pretended to live with them as sisters, and in process of time were discovered, sister being found pregnant by brother. And to aggravate their wickedness, they esteemed copulation as a most sacred mystery, known only to themselves, and which the profane were not allowed to put into practice. What was abominable in others being highly meritorious in themselves, for, saith Erroneus again, they have this grace descending to them from the unspeakable and unnameable copulation above, for which reason they ought always to be meditating on the mystery of copulation, and thus they persuade silly people addressing them in discourse. Whoever is in the world and of the world, and mingleth with a woman, is not of the truth, nor shall pass into the truth, because he mingleth in concupiscence. Therefore continence, they say, is necessary to us natural men, but by no means to themselves, who are spiritual and perfect among them. Oh, I'm sorry, I misread that. Therefore continence, they say, is necessary to us natural men, but by no means to themselves, who are spiritual and perfect, among whom the seed small from above is perfected here, Compare Tertullian. To quote Clemens Alexandrinus, I will bring in to open light your most mysteries, not ashamed to speak what you are not ashamed to worship. That means the secrets of both sexes, for I may well call them atheists who impudently worship those parts which modesty forbids to mention. Chapter 14. Lamaism. Lamaism was founded about 407 AD by a bodhisattva called, it is said, Kam Shim, in Chinese Boyan Chi Ying, the voice which reflects the world. On the mountain Butala, around which was built the sacred city of Lhasa. Lamaism is not only a religion, it is a theistic government. In 1206, when Tibet was conquered by Genghis Khan, a Mongol, Buddhism became the established religion, but in 1368, when Tibet fell from the hands of the Mongols into those of the Chinese, Lamaism, losing its temporal power, became merely a religion. Its spiritual power remaining, however, the same, and the religion of more than 250 million men. The Lamas are priests of Buddha among the Mongols and Tibetans, but Lamaism is not Orthodox Buddhism. Gautama Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, laid down the following laws governing the attainment of nirvana, state of not being. Their enumeration will serve to show Buddhism and Lamaism differ. According to that great teacher, the 10 obstacles which prevent people from attaining the supreme liberation are the belief in the ego, doubt, the belief in the efficacy of rites and ceremonies, sensual desires, anger, the wish to live in a world less coarse than our own, the wish to live in a more subtle world than our own, pride, agitation, ignorance. The few quotations given hereafter from the very remarkable books of Madame Alexandra David Neal can only serve to show students of these subjects the great value of the books themselves. Quoting Bhagavad Gita, she says, Orthodox Buddhism denied the existence. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt here. She actually wrote, she writes. Like, she wasn't going to say in her book, she says. Like, I'm sorry. I'm not going to cut this. Okay. Quoting Bhagavad Gita, she writes, Orthodox Buddhism denied the existence of a permanent soul which transmigrated and considered his theory as the most pernicious of errors, but the great majority of Buddhists have fallen back into this old belief of the Hindus concerning the jiva, self, which periodically changes its old body for a new one, as we cast off old clothes for new. The Tibetan clergy comprises a theocratic aristocracy, the members of which are called lamas, tulkus. According to popular belief, the tulku is either the reincarnation of a saint or a dead sage, or else the incarnation of a superhuman being or god or demon. In answer to a question she put to the Dalai Lama on the definition of the word tulku, Madame David Neal quotes him as saying, a bodhisattva is the base form from which can spring numberless magical forms. The force he engenders by a perfect concentration of thought enables him simultaneously to show a phantom similar to himself in thousands and thousands of worlds. He is not only able to create human forms, but every other kind as well, even to inanimate objects such as houses, enclosures, forests, roads, bridges, etc., etc. And he can produce atmospheric phenomena, as well as the elixir of immortality, which quenches all thirst. This expression, he explained, was to be taken both in a literal and symbolic sense. In fact, concluded the Dalai Lama, his power to create magic forms is limitless. The Kantomas are reincarnated women, fairies, and may either be married or in holy orders. The usual method employed for locating the new body appropriated by an old soul is the following. A child answering to the prescribed conditions is discovered and a Lama diviner is consulted. Should he pronounce in favor of the candidate, the following form of trial takes place. Some personal belongings of the deceased Lama are mixed with other similar ones, and the child must point out the first, thus proving that he recognizes the things that were in his former existence. This system assumed its present form towards the year 1650, when the fifth Grand Lama, Lobsang Gyatso, having become sovereign of Tibet but wishing to acquire a higher dignity, proclaimed himself the reincarnation or avatar of Chenrezig, a dignitary of the Mayanist pantheon. Simultaneously, he established his master as Grand Lama of the monastery of Trekilumpo, proclaiming him the reincarnation of Upamed, a mystic Buddha, of whom Chenrezig was the spiritual son. The example thus given by the Lama king simulated the creation of tulkus. Soon all monasteries made a point of having at their head the incarnation of some celebrated personage. Thus the Dalai Lama, the political head of the Tibet today, is said to still be the reincarnation of Chenrezig, and the present Chachi Lama, one of Upamed. The palace of the Dalai Lama is the monastery of Galden, situated some 20 kilometers from Lhasa. It was founded by Tsongkhapa in the 15th century. Tsongkhapa, the reformer, forbade marriage and the use of fermented beverages to the clergy. His followers, called Gelugpas, are known as the Yellow Sect, and their favorite god is Jigsjed, the Destroyer, the Terrible, another version of the Hindu god Shiva. The Red Sect, the Sakyapas, those distinguished by their red hats, are their religious opponents. As regards the Tibetan gods and the ritual pertaining to their worship, Madame David Neal gives us the following most illuminating description. To the respiratory exercises repeated several times a day, the recluse often joins meditation contemplation assisted by kilkors. A kilkor, a magic circle, is a kind of diagram drawn on paper or stuff or engraved on metal, stone, or wood. Deities or lamas are generally represented on them by little pyramids of paste called torma. Kilkors, is that a difficult word, are also designed with colored powder on boards or on the floor, but only such persons as have received a special initiation may compose or draw them. Each kilkor, moreover, requires a particular initiation, and that erected by a non-initiate would remain a dead thing impossible to animate and powerless. An advanced student wishing to evoke a bodhisattva or deity seeks to animate a kilkor which has hitherto only served as a focus for concentration. The Hindus endow magical diagrams as well as the statues of deities with life before worshipping them. The object of this rite, called prana pratistha, is to convey to the inanimate object, by means of psychic currents, the energy of the worshipper. The life thus infused into the latter is kept by the daily cult which has rendered it, for it lives on in the concentration of thought which has given it birth. Should it suddenly be deprived of this subtle food, the living soul within will perish and die of inanition, the object reverting to its former condition of inert matter. The Tibetan mystics animate their kilkor by a similar method, but they do not aim at making it an object of worship, and the material representation of kilkor is abolished when, after a certain amount of practice, it becomes purely a mental image. A tradition of the Kaigyupas relates that the founder of their sect, Marpa, was blamed by his master, Guru Narota, for having paid homage first to the kilkor. "It is I who constructed the Kyokar," declared Narota. "Its life and energy were infused in it by me. Without me, those figures would only be inert objects. The gods that inhabit it are born of my spirit. Therefore, it is to me that homage is primarily due." According to Tibetan occultists, these beings, the gods, have acquired a kind of real existence due to the innumerable thoughts which have been concentrated on them. According to the Tibetans, during the celebration of a rite, the thoughts of the officiating evocator concentrated on the deities who exist already cause these to become more powerful and more real for him. By identifying himself with them, the evocator establishes contact with an accumulation of energy infinitely greater than that which he alone might generate. Thus we must conclude that the gods of Eastern magic correspond to what our Occidental scientists call thought forms. That these thought forms can be projected and reabsorbed into the person of their creator is a theory with which all students of spiritism and psychic science are familiar, but that they can detach from their makers and lead separate existences, empowered for food or I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. What am I saying? Let me start that sentence again. That these thought forms can be projected and reabsorbed into the person of their creator is a theory with which all students of spiritism and psychic science are familiar, but that they can detach from their makers and lead separate existences, empowered for good or evil by the collective thought force of their worshippers. It's an idea with which the Western world is still unfamiliar. Gods, demons, the whole universe is a mirage, a fantasy of the brain issuing their form and resolvent thereto. Thus the aim of the teaching is to bring the student to understand that the world and all its phenomena are but phantasms born of our own imagination. This, in short, is the fundamental teaching of the mystics of Tibet. Among the various tricks taught to initiates and described by Madame David Neal in her books are yoga, which is breathing and exercises in the initiations, levitation, Longam, which means fast walking, Tumo, which means self-heating, and telepathy. Buddha, who, after a thorough investigation of them, rejected the physical practices of the Brahmins, pays little heed to the breathing exercises of yoga in his spiritual teaching. Madame David Neal tells the following anecdote of the great master. One day Buddha, traveling with one of his disciples, met an emancipated yogi alone in a hut in the middle of the forest. The master stopped, inquiring how long the ascetic had lived in that place practicing such austerities. 25 years, answered the yogi. And what results have you obtained after such dire efforts? Queried the Buddha. Further, I am able to cross a river walking on the water, proudly declared the anchorite. Ah, I, my poor friend, answered the sage sympathetically. Have you really wasted so much time for that, when for a pittance you can get taken across it on a ferry? On page 157 of her remarkable book, Initiations, L'Amique Madame David Neal explains further the existence of another school of curious rites, presumably a development of degenerate Hindu tantric Buddhism, to the practice of which may be ascribed much that seems objectionable in the Oriental occultism, which has filtered through to the Western world. There we are told that a certain class of Tibetan occultists teach a method of semi-physical, semi-psychic stimulation, which consists in such singular practices that of causing of seminal flow ejected in the course of sexual union to be reabsorbed, etc., etc. Tibet is indeed the land of demons, where official Lamaism competes with unofficial sorcery and magic, and white and black still remains the law of the land. Chapter 15, the Yezidees, Devil Worshippers. The sect of the Yezidees was founded by Sheikh Adi in the 5th century. Mr. W. B. Seabrook's observations on the Yezidees, as recorded in his book Adventures in Arabia, form a basis for the study of the beliefs of this sect. According to his informant, the Yazidi faith is briefly this: God created 7 spirits, as a man lighteth one lamp after another, and the first of these spirits was Satan, whom God made supreme ruler of the earth for a period of 10,000 years. And because Satan was supreme master of the earth, those who dwelt on it could prosper only by doing him homage and worshipping him. Since the true name was forbidden, Mehmed Hamdi told me they referred to Shaitan as Melek Taos, angel peacock, and worshipped him in the form of a brass bird. While the name of Shaitan was forbidden, he said, so much so that if a Yazidi hears it spoken, their law commands him either to kill the man who uttered it or kill himself. Yet we could talk as freely with them about Melek Taos as we could to a Christian about Jesus. A priest of the cult also volunteered the following information to Seabrook on the Yazidi divinity. Our difference from all other religions is this, that we know God is so far away that we can have no contact with him, and he, on his part, has no knowledge or interest of any sort of concerning human affairs. It is useless to pray to him or worship him. He cares nothing about us. He has given the entire control of this world for 10,000 years to the bright spirit Malek Taos, and him, therefore, we worship. Muslims and Christians are wrongly taught that he whom we call Malek Taos is the spirit of evil. We know that this is not true. He is the spirit of power and the ruler of this world. At the end of 10,000 years of his reign, of which we are now in the 3,000, he will re-enter paradise as the chief of the 7 bright spirits, and all his true worshippers will enter paradise with him. The grand priest of the order, the Mir, receives 1/7 part of the harvest of the land. He is the arbiter of all religious matter, and under him rank 7 ecclesiastical orders. The doctrine of the Yezidees is contained in 3 sacred books: the Black Book, the Revelation, and the Contract with the Devil. But a knowledge of reading and writing is restricted to the priests of the first order and is classified by the sect as a serious sin. Chapter 16. Orthodox Islam. The Arabian Peninsula was the home of nomads and mountaineers when in the 7th century Muhammad arose as a self-styled prophet and the creator of Islamism. The doctrine of Islam has 3 dogmas: monotheism, belief in the prophet, namely Muhammad, the law of retribution. The sacred book of Islamism, the Quran, was devoid of mystic teaching. The Fi, for every believer, is the code of morals and obligations such as fast, prayer, pilgrimage to Mecca, etc. Mysticism was interjected into Islamism by Sufism. Muhammad aimed at the establishment of the religion which he declared was revealed to him during periods of trance which he frequently underwent. He was determined to impose this religion on all the Arabs, and through much bloodshed he succeeded in stamping out the Qurayshites from whom he took Mecca. The death of Muhammad was the signal for disruption among his followers and innumerable divisions, both political and religious, from the history of the Arabs during their periods of conquest, which began immediately after the death of Muhammad during the Caliphate of Omar in 634 to 644. Chapter 17. Unorthodox Islam. The Ishmaelites, the Lodge of Cairo. Manichaeism was not the only secret association that sprang from the initiations of the Magi. In the 7th century of our era, we meet with similar societies possessing an influence not limited to the regions in which they arose. Variations of one single thought, which aimed at combining the venerable doctrines of Zoroaster with Christian belief. Of these societies or sects, the following... I'm sorry. I always say that word sects. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to start again. Of these societies or sects, the following may be mentioned. The followers of Keumers, the worshippers of Servan, certain Zoroastrians, so-called dualists, Gnostics, and lastly, the followers of Mastic, the most formidable and disastrous of all, preaching universal equality and liberty, the irresponsibility of man, and the community of property and woman. The Arabs, having rendered themselves masters of Persia in the 7th century, the sects of that country set to work to spread their tenets among Islam in order to undermine it. This is corroborated by Hecathorn, who writes, the Persian sects examined the Quran, pointed out its contradictions, and denied its divine origin. And so there arose in Islamism that movement which attacks dogmas and destroys faith and substitutes for blind belief free inquiry. In Persia and in Mesopotamia had spread the new rationalism, the philosophical hearsay of the Mutazilites, the Schismatics, exposed by Hassan al-Basri. The Jew Abdallah ibn Saba presented himself as the prophet of the future Imam, who was to manifest. He meant to overthrow the caliphate and to uphold the rights of Muhammad al-Hanafi, the son of Ismail, the descendant of the prophet by his daughter Fatima, the wife of Ali. Thus was founded the Shia sect. The Fatimite dynasty from Fatima, daughter of Muhammad, was founded in 909 AD when Ahmed Said, the son of a Jewess who had married the Shia chief al-Hussein, conquered Egypt and Syria, establishing the center of Cairo. Declaring himself to be the long-expected Imam, Said, on coming to power, assumed the name of Obaid Allah el-Mahdi. The Fatimite dynasty lasted from 909 to 1171. Hecathorn informs us that the Doat, or supreme missionary or judge, shared the power with the prince. Meetings were held in the lodge at Cairo, which contained many books and scientific instruments. Science was the professed object, but the real aim was very different. The course of instruction was divided into 9 degrees. The 9th degree, as the necessary result of the teaching of the former, taught that nothing was to be believed and that everything was lawful. Egypt especially seems as if predestined to be the birthplace of secret societies, of priests, warriors, and fanatics. It is the region of mysteries. Cairo has succeeded the ancient Memphis, the doctrine of the Lodge of Wisdom, that of the Academy of Heliopolis. The throne of the descendants of Fatima was to be surrounded with an army of assassins, a formidable bodyguard, a mysterious militia was to be raised, that should spread far and wide the fame and terror of the Caliphate of Cairo, and inflict fatal blows on the abhorred rule of Baghdad. The missionaries spread widely, and in Arabia and Syria partisans were one to whom the designs of the order were unknown, but who had with fearful solemnity sworn blind obedience. The Fatimites had received from the sect the mission of destroying, or at least of disrupting, Islam. The successor of Obaid Allah continued this work, having himself proclaimed a Shia, while in reality he was skeptic. It was under the Caliph Hakim that the Druses came into being. The Shia sects, who recognized Muhammad al-Hanafi as the last living Imam, were called Ishmaelites or Septimans. From their midst sprang a secret body, the Khoja, which, in spite of persecution, still exists in Persia and India, where its exotic chief is the anglicized Indian, the Aga Khan, whose followers are the moneylenders of Islam, a profession forbidden by Muhammad. Still another Shia sect, the Duodecimans, or Imanites, recognize Muhammad al-Muntazar, the 12th Imam. Under the Fatimite Caliph Hakim, a new religion sprang out of Ismailism, that of the Druses, so called from its inventor, a certain Darosi. This religion differs little from Ishmaelism, except that it introduces the dogma of the incarnation of God himself on earth, under the form of the Caliph Hakim. When the Fatimite Caliph Mostansir ascended the throne, he re-established the Ismailian belief, and the Druzes, driven from Egypt, took refuge in Lebanon, where they still exist. So that's the end of chapter 16. Next up is chapter 17, the Druzes, but I'm going to continue that at another time.